proposes an amendment number 9.
Mr. President, there's no responsibility we have as members of Congress more serious than protecting the men and women who defend this nation. We're facing a national security crisis due to Joe Biden and his administration, who have repeatedly been unwilling to act against repeated hostilities from the nation of Iran. They have looked repeatedly for excuses to justify that inaction. Now, I want to be clear. I am not where some members of this body are who want to maintain this authorization for use of military force. I want to vote to repeal this authorization of use of military force. The Iraq War was a long time ago. I believe the Iraq War was a mistake at the time it was fought. And I would be enthusiastic about Congress reasserting its war-making and war-declaring power by repealing the AUMF. But at the same time, I don't want the repeal of the AUMF to be used as an excuse by the Biden administration to roll over and do nothing if and when Iran attacks and murders American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in the Middle East. And Mr. President, this is not hypothetical. Just last week, General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified before the House that from January 2021 until last week, there were 78 attacks against American forces in the Middle East by Iranian-linked fighters. 78. The Biden administration responded 3 times. 75 of them went unresponded. Tragically, but predictably, appeasement doesn't work. On Thursday morning, the CENTCOM commander was testifying in front of the House. Here on the floor of the Senate, we were debating this very issue, the AUMF and Iranian aggression. We now know that at 6:30 in the morning Eastern Time on Thursday, Iran attacked U.S. forces, murdered a United States citizen, a U.S. contractor, and wounded 6 other Americans. That happened at 6:30 in the morning Eastern Time on Thursday. Mr. President, you didn't know that on Thursday. Mr. President, I didn't know that on Thursday. None of us knew that on Thursday. Why? Because the Biden administration kept it a secret for 12 hours. Because they didn't want to tell the Senate while we were debating this issue that an American had just been murdered by Iran. That's disgraceful. You should be angry about it. I should be angry about it. My amendment is very simple. My amendment restates that under Article 2 of the Constitution, the President has the authority to defend U.S. troops and to respond to Iranian aggression. The opponents of this bill, my friend Senator Kaine will speak shortly. What he said in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he said the amendment's unnecessary. Article 2 already does that. Well, good. If it is unnecessary, then the Democrats ought to support my amendment and add it. Because I'll tell you what it will get. If we add this amendment, I will vote yes on the AUMF repeal. If we don't add this amendment, I'm a no. And here's why. I don't want to give an excuse for the Biden administration the next time Iran attacks to do nothing. And if it's unnecessary legally, it ought to be an easy give to say, let's add it to be clear. If you attack U.S. forces, the President has the authority to respond. Because I don't want the Biden administration using the repeal of the AUMF as an excuse for their weakness, as an excuse for their appeasement. There are some in the political world that are in favor of unending wars. I am not one of them. But I am in favor of the United States defending our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. And let me say this. I don't know if the amendment's going to get the votes or not to pass. I think we will get most of the Republicans. I don't know if any Democrats will vote for it or not. But if this amendment is defeated and the Congress goes on to repeal the AUMF, and Iran takes that as encouragement that the Biden administration will not retaliate, I believe the consequences will be lives lost. I believe we'll be back on this floor with American soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines who have lost their lives due to Iranian aggression because the Ayatollah believed the Biden administration would not respond. You don't want to see that, Mr. President. I don't want to see that. I believe no member of this body wants to see that. And if it's legally redundant, all the better to say, let's send a message to the Ayatollah. If you attack American forces, the President, the Commander-in-Chief, has the authority to respond and defend American forces. That is the number one responsibility of every member of this body. I yield the floor.
Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to the amendment. The bill that's on the floor is the effort to repeal authorizations for war against Iraq that were passed by this body in 1991 and 2002. These are not Iran authorizations. Iran and Iraq are not the same nation. The wars against Iraq are over, and we need to repeal these. This morning in the Armed Services Committee, we heard from General Austin. He talked about his visit to Iraq. He was there when we were fighting against them as an adversary. Now they are a strategic partner in the region against non-state terrorists and against Iranian aggression. They are an ally and a partner. Senator Cruz's amendment does restate Article 2 powers in part of the findings in a way that I don't find objectionable, but then in another part of the amendment, it goes on to authorize affirmative military action by the United States against the nation of Iran. Iran is a bad actor and getting worse. I don't disagree with that. But if what we need is a debate about a war authorization with Iran, we shouldn't do it on the basis of a 1-minute amendment offered on the floor of the Senate. That's how we got into this problem in the first place. The Iraq authorization in 2002 was considered in the Senate for 1 day. No committee proceeding. 5 amendments in 1 day, and we went into a war that most would agree was one of the worst blunders strategically that this body has made. Let's not rush into a war authorization with Iran. If there needs to be military authorities to take offensive action against Iran, let's at least give it the dignity of a debate, a full debate, not a 1-minute amendment vote. Finally, this amendment is opposed by groups all over the political spectrum, from Concerned Veterans of America to the Friends National Committee on Legislation to the American Legion, because they don't think we should be rushing into war. Iran and its challenging activity and aggression warrant some significant attention, not a 1-minute amendment vote on a bill that it's not related to. I urge opposition to the amendment.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I respect my friend from Virginia, but he is mistaken. This amendment is not a new authorization for military force. It restates current law. The language in the finding is word for word the finding that President Trump put in place when he authorized the strike that took out General Soleimani. After that strike against General Soleimani, I introduced an amendment on this floor to commend President Trump and the armed forces for taking out General Soleimani, and we voted on this, commending President Trump and our armed forces for taking out Soleimani. This is not breaking new ground. This is reiterating the proposition that the Commander-in-Chief has the authority to defend U.S. armed forces. And my friend from Virginia, I would note, by the way, earlier last week we voted on Senator Graham's amendment. That would have been a new authorization for use of military force. Many senators voted against it. This is a much narrower amendment. This says if Iran attacks U.S. troops, the Commander-in-Chief can defend those troops. That is current law, but it is important for Iran to hear. It is important for our troops to hear. It is important for the Biden administration to hear. And nowhere in my friend from Virginia's remarks did he dispute that Iran has attacked the United States 78 times in the last 2.5 years and that the Biden administration responded only 3 times. We owe our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines to have their back. I urge support of this amendment.